So the male escort gets on the stand, right? Black male escort. Yes, he's a black man. He's like probably like 5'7", really stocky, like, you know, muscle. I could tell when he walked in, I'm like, oh, he must be like a dancer or something. So he's on the stand and he's describing his relationship with Cassie and Diddy. And he's saying that, you know, up until a few years ago, in New York, whenever they would come here, they would call him because he would engage in different sexual acts with them, right? Allegedly. So he's like, every single time he got the phone call, it was from Cassie. The way that he met them was through his boss. So his boss came to him one day and said, look, I have this couple who wants to do something for the wife. It's a bachelorette party. They need him in the NYPD t-shirt. And he says, Cassie opens the door. She's in red lingerie. She's in a wig, dark glasses, and pumps. And she's like, listen, your boss told me that I'm supposed to give you $200. And this is what he's alleging. And instead, she gives him $4,000. She's like, I want to explain to you what's about to happen. So this is not a bachelorette party. My husband likes to do special things for me. He wanted to do this for my birthday. He just wants us to like rub baby oil on each other and, you know, just kind of like get familiar with each other.
You know, one point that came up probably within maybe the first 5 minutes of the defense opening was, you know, Tenny Garagos introduced Diddy officially to the jury, where it's like, this is our defendant, Sean Combs, because they refer to him as Sean Combs. It's never really Diddy or P. Diddy or Puff Daddy inside that courtroom. It's always Sean. And so he kind of stood up, sat back down a little bit after his introduction. And, you know, this was something that we were expecting, is for pretty much the government, or excuse me, the defense, to say that the government shouldn't have any type of place inside of Diddy's bedroom. That, you know, they admit that Diddy had a temper, especially when he drinks. You know, sometimes he gets so angry. They admit that Diddy lied and he was not the best boyfriend or partner. He was kind of mean to his girlfriend.
All right, what's up with the YouTube fam? I'm back again with another video right now. Look, I know y'all just heard what we just heard in the beginning of this video right now. It's getting real freaky and kinky out there. But look, before we move forward into this video, I want to tell everybody out there, I appreciate y'all for being here. If you're a supporter of the channel and you rocking with me, make sure y'all hitting that like button and leaving a comment here and there. That way you can get notified and stay getting notified when I do drop videos and stuff like that. Other than that, I want to let y'all know also that I hope that everything is okay with you and your family, and I wish y'all nothing but the best in every aspect of y'all's life. When I say that, I'm only talking to those who say it back to me in return, and to those who reciprocate the same energy back to me also, but just not typing it out for whatever the reason may be. Now, let's go ahead and move forward into this whole situation. Now, as far as this Diddy case, man, we really just don't know what to believe, but we can say that it is some crazy accusations out there. Now, a lot of the stuff that was just, you know, broadcasted in the beginning of this video, if I got a chance to post it, because I don't know if it'll go through or not, but basically the escort that, you know, is involved with this situation said that Cassie was the one who asked him to do, you know, whatever, right? And you know, a lot of people are going against her now because of that one statement. You know, I just feel like that the internet is just so fickle. You know, you can have people on your side one day, they'll switch on you just like that, just because of one sentence, one word, and things like that. Now, if it's true or not, I really don't know, and I ain't here to pick no sides in this shit, because, you know, I feel like a lot of people were willing participants, but at the same time, a lot of stuff probably happened when people didn't want it to happen. So, you know, it goes either way, and I ain't contradicting myself. I'm just not being biased in the situation where I wasn't there and I don't know what the hell was going on. But ultimately, you know, the video that I do have coming up now is a better breakdown of everything that happened yesterday. So we're finna get into that. And I'm only saying this because I know the people who I'm finna react to is very thorough. I haven't got a chance to watch this shit. I just seen so many things popping up yesterday about this case. I was like, damn, it's going down in court. But, you know, that's how it is in a federal trial or any trial at that, you know. But they're saying that Diddy is very, you know, frail looking. He looks totally different. I don't know if I posted the video or not, but they said he has grays everywhere now, and that just come with old age and stress and shit like that. Certain deficiencies that you might, you know, come across with not getting the proper nutrients and things every day of your life that you normally would get out of here. But you know, it's a lot of things that's going to come up. It's a new day today. Cassie will be out there today, allegedly, giving her side of the story, testifying and things like that. And it's gonna be a shocker, you know what I'm saying? So I will be coming at y'all with another video of that if y'all want that. If you're rocking with me and you want that, hit the like button and I will continue to bring y'all these videos. Other than that, let's go ahead and get into this and see what the hell happened in the first day of trial.
My husband likes to do special things for me. He wanted to do this for my birthday. He just wants us to like rub baby oil on each other and, you know, just kind of like get familiar with each other. And whatever happens from there, if you're comfortable, I'm open to it. So he's like, okay. So he goes in. He says when he walked in, on site, like just look at it. He literally said Cassie was one of the most beautiful women he ever seen in his life. He couldn't even believe that it was happening like this. So he walks in and he alleges that Puff was there sitting in the room, but you couldn't tell it was him because he had a bandana tied around his face and he had a hat on and he was sitting in the corner. He said that they got into it. He says that they were rubbing each other with the oils. There was other lubricant there as well. And that him and Cassie had sex on the couch in that hotel allegedly. And that the whole time Puff sat in the corner and
executive producer. That's what he called it.
And he did say he did say that he never Puff never got involved, but he was telling them what to do at different times.
That's how we know he don't make beats.
And he also made it clear too that when on the first time that they linked up, Cassie told him like, you have nothing to worry about. My husband is not gay. He's not going to touch you. He's not going to whatever. He just he might tell us what to do or whatever, but he's not going to be. It's just going to be us doing the physical things. He said that they linked up a lot more times after that, but he did say that there was two things he said. He said one time he couldn't get hard anymore because he went to Cassie's house. They got comfortable with him. He came to Cassie's house. When he was there, Cassie and Diddy was in the room. He was outside in the living room. Diddy comes out and goes off on Cassie, like allegedly beats her up bad because she took a long time to come back in the room to him. And he said after he saw that was his first time seeing her get physically touched. He couldn't even engage in sexual activity with the two of them. And they haven't gotten to cross-examine him yet. Like Diddy's team started and then they had to stop.
What about the urination?
The urination thing. So he randomly was just recounting their experiences, and he just came out and said, yeah, because they were asking him what are some of the things you would have to do. He said, well, one time Cassie asked me to urinate on her, and now we all gasping like, wait, because the prosecutors.
So Cassie asked him, not Diddy.
Exactly, because the prosecutors opened up that literally probably 15 minutes before that. The prosecutors were like, Cassie is going to tell you that Diddy allegedly made this escort on her. There's an escort sitting in front of us, sworn in on the stand, saying, "No, Cassie told me to do that."
And this is what I was talking about yesterday when I said they're about to put Cassie through it, and I hope her husband isn't hearing anything he didn't already know.
Yeah, right.
Because if not, that gonna make for some very awkward moments at home.
Yeah.
And if you didn't know that your wife did that on and then trying this out in court, it's a lot. Hey, could you handle that?
But let me tell you, not only because he had left, he was in the back of the court, and then he went. I think they took him to a back room. But all the Diddy kids are there, right? So his daughters are there. I was sitting behind them. It was awkward for me to watch them have to listen to all of this. After he started, the male escort started getting into a lot of and stuff, they got up and left.
Who told him to leave? Did Diddy say leave or?
No, Diddy didn't tell them to leave. I don't know if there was a conversation or not. I looked up from writing and I saw them get up, so I don't know. But I know that they were checking on each other throughout. I saw them ask Christian at one point, you okay? Because they brought Kim into this as well, having conversations about the jealousy that was between Puff and Cassie, because the defense is just trying to paint this as this was just a jealous, toxic relationship, and it started with Diddy not being able to leave Kim alone up until the time of her passing. But there's more. I got to bring this back at the top of the next hour.
I got more questions when we come back, because I want to know what Diddy was doing during all of this.
Okay.
What was his body language like?
Got you. And the kids were giving off some of the languages as well, too, because when that male escort said that part about Cassie, Christian and Justin, the way that they looked at each other, finally somebody saying that's what it felt like. That's not what they said, but that's what it felt like. So we'll come back on the top of the next hour, because there's a whole nother witness, and they broke this witness down on the stand.
All right.
Day one of the Sean Combs criminal trial was definitely eventful. Aside from compelling and revealing opening statements by both the prosecution and defense, the jury heard the first witnesses in the case. Everything from Astroglide to alleged paid work to explicit text messages, Diddy wearing a disguise, the rapper being pushed up against a wall. This is your definitive recap of everything that happened inside of that courtroom today. Well, Friday was officially day one of the federal criminal trial of Sean Diddy Combs. From Cassandra Ventura's lawsuit back in November of 2023, to the plethora of allegations and other lawsuits, to the raids on his properties, to his arrest and indictment in September of 2024, to his multiple attempts to seek bail, to several superseding indictments. May 12th, 2025 marks the day the jury was finalized, opening statements began, and we heard the first witnesses, the first witness testimony in his criminal trial. Remember, this is a trial where federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York assert Combs engaged in sex trafficking, racketeering conspiracy, transportation, to engage in prostitution, that he established this network, this enterprise, this pattern of criminal activity that was particularly engaged in the abuse of women. Right now, we are going to lay out day one, jury being finalized, opening statements, the witnesses who testified. So for that, I'm going to bring in law and crimes reporter Elizabeth Milner, who is in that courthouse today. Elizabeth, so good to see you, as always. First things first, okay, and I want to let you go because you haven't even eaten today. I know there's been so much going on today. So first things first, what was it like today getting into that courtroom? I understand you had trouble getting into that courtroom. What was the scene like?
Oh, well, Jesse, I got here super early, a little bit like around 7 o'clock a.m. this morning, and thankfully we had somebody kind of holding a place in line for us because that's how many people want to be here, want to be inside that courthouse, want to be inside that courtroom, whether it's the general public, whether it's journalists, whether it's other lawyers just wanting to get a piece of the action. Let me tell you something, Jesse. When I came here this morning, the line was all the way down the block, and it was just crazy packed with so many journalists, so many people who just wanted a chance to again be inside that courtroom today. But it was just a madhouse. Like a lot of us in the media were kind of comparing it to the Hunger Games. It was really that serious because a lot of people wanted to make sure, one, that they had their place in line, and two, that they were able to get inside in their same place in line, because obviously with this being such a high profile trial with a lot of eyes on it, everyone wanted to be inside that courtroom. So there were some times people were cutting the lines, people were trying to get ahead. They were, trying to get up in any way possible, any way possibly that they could.
I won't give it
the bailiffs take us up to that courtroom. They're taking us in maybe packs of 6 or 7. It's never like the full group, and then the rest are turned away. But there are some people who try to sneak in with the group that are going up. But the bailiffs, sometimes they catch it, sometimes they don't. But then us who have those press passes were able to kind of glide right through. But then there were still a packed courtroom today, especially for day one, especially for a very high profile day, that being opening statements. But it was crazy just to even get inside that courthouse today.
And I followed you on X, and you took a video of Rodney Lil Rod Jones, who filed his own lawsuit against Sean Combs. He showed up today. That was something, to say the least. I mean, was he in the courtroom at all? Were you surprised to see him? What was he doing?
I was a little surprised to see him kind of standing in the line, just, like the rest of us. He came in probably, I would say, a little after maybe 7:30. Like it was right before 8, because around 8:30 they started bringing us into the court house. But, I was kind of stunned to see him inside that line with all of us. He came in, he had the sunglasses on, he had 2 chains on, not to be confused with the rapper or anything like that. But, a lot of cameras were inside his face, and through his attorney, he had pretty much said that he is not going to be making any type of comments, not going to be giving any type of interview. So we didn't see any of that while we were standing outside the courthouse, because remember, for our viewers, we're not allowed to have our phones inside. As soon as we walk inside those doors, for the most part, the marshals, the bailiffs are telling us to turn our phones off. And so once we all got inside the courthouse, I saw him kind of standing in line with his attorney as well as his entourage, going up with members of the public. And so probably for the first half of the day, I did see him inside that courtroom. He was paying attention. He was following along with, the preemptive strikes of the jury selection, as well as the opening statements. And then around lunchtime, not kind of clear where he had went afterwards, or maybe, had no idea where he went pretty much afterwards. So, and this afternoon I didn't see him in the courtroom, but for this morning we definitely did see him inside that courtroom along with his attorney as well too.
Before we even get into the opening statements, before we even get into the jury being finalized, who was in the courtroom for Sean Combs? Were there any notable faces? And how did Sean Combs appear?
Well, he appeared, in good spirits, considering that today is a very big day. It was day one. It was opening statements. He was brought out a little bit before 9 a.m. He was wearing a gray sweater. He had a white undershirt on. He had gray slacks. He had his glasses with him. He waved at his family, kind of gave the little heart sign as well, too. He stood up at the defense table. He was sorting through papers. But one thing I found pretty interesting today, Jesse, is that we could see him reading the Bible. And this was before the preemptive strikes were going on. And so maybe this was, to get him into the good spirits. Maybe it was because he needed, maybe some religion or that type of thing. And so, yeah, a lot of us kind of spotted him with the Bible. At first we were like, is that a Bible? And then when he got up, put it inside of his, I guess, his legal briefcase or whatever he brings inside that courtroom, then we're like, okay, yeah, that was definitely a Bible. But as far as some memorable faces inside that courtroom today, it was really stacked. We had Mark Garagos in the courtroom, Karen Agnifilo, who is the wife of Mark Agnifilo. We had Lil Rod inside that courtroom. We had Doug Wigder inside that courtroom, and he's a notable face because he represents Cassie Ventura, who is expected to testify tomorrow. We had Quincy Brown inside that courtroom, one of Diddy's, he's Diddy's adopted son. We had Justin Combs, his mother Misa was inside that courtroom. We had Christian Combs, Delilah Combs, Jesse Combs, Chance Combs, Janice Combs, that's going to be Diddy's mother. We had Dana Tran inside that courtroom. Dana is also a pretty notable figure too because she is the daughter of Diddy's youngest child, Love, who I think is maybe 2 years old, 3 years old at this time. So obviously, the baby wasn't in the courtroom or anything like that. Then we also had the twins' caregiver / guardian. She's also Kim Porter's best friend as well too. And so those are some of the pretty big notable faces that we saw inside that courtroom. Now I did hear rumblings that both Lisa Bloom and Gloria Allred were also inside the courthouse today. I believe that they were in the media overflow room, which is pretty surprising given their credentials especially. But those are the main noticeable people that were inside that courtroom today.
Now, you mentioned jury selection. You mentioned the preemptory challenges. We knew that the day was going to start off with finalizing the jurors. You need a jury for a criminal trial. Now, both the prosecution and the defense, they use their preemptory challenges to whittle down the number, right? They're striking jurors not for cause, but for whatever reason, as long as it's not an improper reason, like race or gender. But the defense took issue with who the prosecution was excluding, right?
They definitely did. The defense was pretty much saying that, the government had struck 7 black people, and they had a pretty big argument about that. The defense was alleging that, the government has this pattern and demanded essentially for the government to respond to this, that being the Batson challenge, which Brian Buckmeyer kind of gave me a little privy to from the legalese portion of it. But even as the government was kind of going through all of the prospective jurors that they were striking down, they were for pretty, you could understand the reasons why. Number juror 51 knew all the defendant's children, knew 17 people on the people and places list.
What
watched
the hell?
Making the Band, had a fiance that served time for drug conviction.
Oh,
Another
Lord.
juror, this was number 216. She was moved to strike for cause. She had been arrested 3 times. She didn't disclose, didn't disclose that they harassed a police officer. Juror number 181. Also in this batch, the husband spent 21 years in prison, was concerned, the government was concerned she would be biased. The government says she had worked with individuals with bipolar disorder and concerned she would bring her outside knowledge into this case. Another was dismissed because they had 2 brothers who served time for felonies. This person had watched a news segment about this case and said that they would lose 30% of their income, but was worried that this person might also have an agenda of wanting to be on the jury. Number 163 had an English language issue. Nephew was a gang member who allegedly shot a police officer.
Oh, Lord.
Went to high school with Diddy. Another prospective juror that was struck out, gave inconsistent answers and referred to police as a-holes. Obviously, I'm not going to say the full word, but you can kind of take it from that. And then number 181 was also described as, a view of victims. Looked at Diddy as already guilty of domestic violence.
Damn.
Tried to walk back comments that said, victims jump on bandwagons and catch cases. So those were some of the prospective jurors that, the defense had issue with the government striking them. But, after kind of listening to these reasons, it kind of, gave a little more answer as to why this was happening. But I will tell you, some of the jurors that I was particularly disappointed weren't taken onto the jury was the wand stealer, Jesse. I know you and I...
You got to be slobbering slow to think that you will be able to be on a federal trial with all of this stuff going on. Somebody done even shot the law, cuz. Man, come on, man. This right here gonna make him look so much more worse than he already looked, because they're gonna try to sway the people to believe that nothing but criminals want to help him. You know what I'm saying? And really in all actuality, it do look weird, it do look messed up, but that's just how it be. A lot of people do go to these trials and then they do get turned around just for the simple fact. But it's kind of like, God damn, look what they done did. Somebody done harassed the law, shot one of them. I mean, damn, somebody did 21 years, one of their family, one of their husbands or something like that. You know, just God damn, man, they is cutting up, ain't they? Let's get back into it. I was just like shocked and stunned that these people actually trying to go into a damn federal case that this, you know what I'm saying, that didn't reach this magnitude. It's just crazy, bro. Let's get back into it.
We're kind of hoping that she would stay on, but unfortunately she didn't. Also, you know, from my notes, the woman with ocular migraines, she was dismissed as well too. And so that was just kind of some of the look at some of the jurors that were dismissed from the case and are not currently serving on this panel.
And they selected a jury very quickly today. As you said, the judge rejected the defense's arguments that, as you mentioned, the Batson challenge, striking the validity of these peremptory challenges. And now we have a jury. 8 men, 4 women. There's 6 alternates, 2 women, 4 men. You have all walks of life, all different kinds of ages. And by the way, talking about Brian Buckmeyer, let me call him out actually. Earlier today, you and I were doing a live hit, and there was this guy who was so loud outside screaming in your live shot. Brian Buckmeyer, friend of the show, friend of Law and Crime, stepped in, moved him aside. We love Brian. Now, I want to get into what happened with the opening statement. So, the prosecution started with their opening statement. And by the way, the judge had already given the jury instructions. We all know what that is. But then the prosecution started with their opening statement, and AUSA, Assistant United States Attorney Emily Johnson, delivered the opening statement for the prosecution. What was the main theme of her opening statement, and what were the highlights of the opening statement?
Well, definitely the main theme was just that kind of Diddy was pulling the wolves over everyone's head. You know, the government said that Diddy was a cultural icon, a businessman. He was larger than life, but that also said in that same sentence, or at least the next sentence, you know, he had 20 years of crimes that he was doing that ranged from kidnapping, arson, drug trafficking, sex crimes, obstruction. You know, these are the type of things that were already laid out in the indictment, the second superseding indictment, the third superseding indictment. So all this stuff, you know, we knew for the most part. And then they kind of talked more in depth, you know, about Cassie and the allegations that are involving her. You know, one example is just that on one night, Diddy, according to the government, hunted for her. He found out that she was seeing another man, and then Diddy took his gun and his bodyguards and threatened to even kill this man that Cassie was with. You know, the government said that Diddy had forced Cassie out of her apartment, broke into Cassie's apartment, beat her brutally, you know, beyond just what we had seen through that Intercontinental surveillance video as well, too. You know, the government kind of painting it as the evidence will show that Diddy relied on his inner circle, you know, and together they all worked as a group to pretty much promote Diddy's power, that Diddy would refer to himself as a king. I remember speaking during the lunch break, you know, and that kind of matches the tattoo that he has on the back of his neck that I see from inside that gallery, you know, and so for the most part, I think just going into depth about, you know, these freak-off / wild king nights / hotel nights which were all one and the same, essentially, you know, that Diddy demanded his staff to line up the rooms in advance, you know, with lighting, with lube, with cash for these escorts, drugs for women, and as well as Diddy himself. Women had to dress in lingerie. They had to have white nails, tall heels, something that Cassie had pointed out in her civil claim against Diddy that was later settled. I think, you know, another big takeaway outside of just everything that Cassie had been going through, according to the government, is also this Jane. So, you know, we had spoken a number of times just about, you know, alleged victim 1, 2, 3, and 4. Obviously, there was no mention of victim 3. The government can't find her, so she was not part of any opening statement. But they did talk about Jane, who we presume to be alleged victim number 2, right? She's a single mom. She was, she met Diddy around 2020. Jane was single at the time. However, Diddy was seeing a number of other people. She was introduced to freak-offs by Diddy, and she tried one just to essentially make him happy. The government said that Jane was nervous and thought the freak-offs were going to be a one-time thing, but then he had allegedly kept asking her to do it. She, like Cassie, would even help plan them, thinking that this is what the government says, that, you know, if she were to participate in these freak-offs, that this would kind of also play in a way of getting more quality time with the defendant. She wanted the escorts to wear condoms, but Diddy didn't want them to. Jane had tried to do a freak-off without being on drugs, and then she vomited after having sex with an escort. So we really got to see like a very eye-opening picture of not just what Cassie had went through, but this other alleged victim as well too, who will be going by a pseudonym Jane, presumably Jane Doe. And so that was very eye-opening. As far as what the government was kind of painting. Now, I will say, Jesse, I was a little disappointed in kind of the delivery of opening statements. I will say that. You know, and maybe it was just because this is a delicate matter. We're talking about sex. We're talking about trafficking. We're talking about alleged victims of, you know, domestic violence as well too. But as far as the most part goes, I was really expecting, and maybe it's just because I assumed that because, you know, we have Hollywood, we have star power, that it would just be like a TV show, just very animated, but it wasn't. Pretty much ASA Emily Johnson, she got up
this
there
real life.
She just pretty much read off her opening statements and just kind of essentially how a school teacher would do if they were giving a lecture to their students. It wasn't very animated or anything like that. To be honest, I was a little disappointed, honestly, on both ends of just how the delivery was for opening statements. But, you know, Jesse had said last time that by the time we get to the end of trial, most people don't even remember opening statements to begin with, but it really was just an eye-opening kind of picture that was being painted by the government of what we could expect for this 2-month-long trial.
And look, opening statements are not evidence. They're a preview of what to expect. I think they're quite important in a trial because it's the first time the jury is really hearing about the story they're going to hear for the next 2 months. And for us, you know, I was following along with it. It's the first time we got definitive confirmation that Cassandra Ventura is going to be a part of this case, that she's going to be victim one. To hear about not only a Jane, but hearing that a chef may testify, hearing about chiefs of staff and employees, and that there's a Mia, a former employee, that may testify and provide crucial information in this case. Then we're going to hear from escorts, text messages, where Combs is telling his staff to bring cash for escorts. I think that's important for the transportation to engage in prostitution charge. For me, it felt, from a legal point of view, and I wasn't in that courtroom, but it feels to me they kept trying to explain how this was a crime, that they really have to convince this jury that this was forced, that this was coerced, that this was done against the will of these alleged victims, trying to explain why this is racketeering, why this is sex trafficking. Before we go to the defense and their opening statement, real quick, Elizabeth, anything you could glean from the jury about how they were reacting to the prosecution's opening statement?
Yeah, so from what I was seeing, and I couldn't see like the fronts of their faces or anything like that, but from what I was seeing, just kind of on that side view of the gallery, was just that they were paying close attention. It didn't seem like anyone was necessarily dozing off or just kind of avoiding what was being told right in front of them. For the most part, it seemed like these jurors were very attentive and listening very thoroughly. Some were taking notes, some were just, maybe taking notes just with their brain. I do want to go back really quick, Jesse, to kind of talk about Mia because, I do want to emphasize to the viewers, I took lots of notes and sometimes these just get kind of lost in the shuffle. But as far as Mia goes, she was another person that the government had talked about. She had worked for Diddy for years, but the government was saying that she was subjected to sexual assault too, that Diddy would allegedly put his hand up her skirt, snuck into her bedroom and essentially sexually assaulted her. And so this was another person, in addition to both Cassie as well as Jane Doe, that we really got to see, just kind of the lengths of these allegations. And what kind of makes Mia a little bit differently is that she worked for Diddy for a number of years and continued to do so even afterwards. The government was talking about she couldn't talk about what she had gone through until recently. And so, yeah, they really just were kind of, essentially, the jury was paying very close attention to, this very complicated case. Because, Jesse, you and I, we've obviously been in it since we work here at Law and Crime. We've been covering this case since November of 2023, or when it first started with Cassie's lawsuit. But for some of these jurors, they're really they're really just now getting the full case at them, and a lot was thrown at them in just day one.
Well, hopefully. They don't know everything about it like we do. And they were being honest during the jury selection process. Okay, so now let's talk about the defense. Tenny Garagos, female attorney, delivering the opening statement. I think that was deliberate in a case of sex trafficking and racketeering and prostitution. What were the highlights of her opening statement? What is the defense they're moving forward with?
Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of surprised that Tenny Garagos gave the opening statements for the defense. It seemed like for the longest time, Mark Agnicola was running the show, but it makes a lot of sense as to why it was Tenny Garagos giving those opening statements. Alexandra Shapiro, she's a great defense attorney, but she is kind of a spitfire, so I think Tenny was kind of the right approach here. She, just like Emily Johnson, kind of gave it very just, matter of fact, and came up there with her notes or for her opening statements and just kind of laid it out for the jury. There wasn't a lot of animation, even with her defense openings as well too, but from the defense's perspective, they were painting Diddy and they were honest about it. He's a complicated man, but this isn't a complicated case. Essentially, the defense was saying this is about real relationships that the government is turning into a RICO charge and sex trafficking, and this isn't the case that a lot of people may.
And a lot of people don't even understand the fact that they really don't do one-man RICOs. This is a crazy situation, but I do want to say that as time progresses, I feel like a lot will progress. I feel like a magnitude of people will come out and be charged or testify. It's just not going to be this cut and dry. I think a lot of stuff is going to start happening. You know what I'm saying? Because like what people don't really understand is like some of the shit you've been hearing really don't be nothing compared to what you gonna hear during a trial. As you can see, basically here, a prime example of what they saying now. Like the damn Escort been coming out saying whatever the hell he's saying. I just feel like that, it's tricky. And when you really involved in certain stuff, you gotta be aware, because to be aware is to be alive and free. Your ass can be a part of a whole organization and don't know what the hell doesn't happen until you get up in there. But a lot of people do know what the hell they were doing when they were involved with this. And, you can't see. A lot of people have strayed away from showing Diddy any type of love publicly, but some people are sticking with him, but it's very, 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 very few people. His children happen to see this is one of the most craziest things. Like, damn, I couldn't imagine you hearing me in there, being kinky as hell, listening to everything I done did, figuring out that I like certain shit. You my baby. Hey, you look at me a certain way, boy. This is some crazy. But hey, you do what you do. It come with whatever it come with. You got to deal with the consequences of your actions. It's just sad and unfortunate that this is like a stain on his name forever. But he did what he did allegedly. We don't know if it's true or not, but shit, just being associated with it is all on you. You know what I'm saying? But let's get back into it.
I've heard on the news. That's what the defense says. And so they said that essentially Diddy's story will be told over the next 2 months. One point that came up probably within maybe the first 5 minutes of the defense opening was, Tenny Garagos introduced Diddy officially to the jury, where it's like, this is our defendant, Sean Combs, because they refer to him as Sean Combs. It's never really Diddy or P. Diddy or Puff Daddy inside that courtroom. It's always Sean. And so he kind of stood up, sat back down a little bit after his introduction. And, this was something that we were expecting, is for pretty much the government, the defense, to say that the government shouldn't have any type of place inside of Diddy's bedroom. That, they admit that Diddy had a temper, especially when he drinks. Sometimes he gets so angry. They admit that Diddy lied and he was not the best boyfriend or partner. He was kind of mean to his girlfriends, but he's not charged with being mean. He's not charged with being a jerk to his girlfriends. Essentially, he's charged with criminal acts that they say isn't criminal at all. They pretty much kind of talk about that they'll see domestic violence in this trial, and while they do take it seriously, it doesn't amount to sex trafficking. We're honest about it. He's a complicated man, but this isn't a complicated case. Essentially, the defense was saying this is about real relationships that the government is turning into a RICO charge and sex trafficking, and this isn't the case that a lot of people may have heard on the news. That's what the defense says. And so they said that essentially Diddy's story will be told over the next 2 months. One point that came up probably within maybe the first 5 minutes of the defense opening was, Tenny Garagos introduced Diddy officially to the jury, where it's like, this is our defendant, Sean Combs, because they refer to him as Sean Combs. It's never really Diddy or P. Diddy or Puff Daddy inside that courtroom. It's always Sean. And so he kind of stood up, sat back down a little bit after his introduction. And, this was something that we were expecting, is for pretty much the government, the defense, to say that the government shouldn't have any type of place inside of Diddy's bedroom. That, they admit that Diddy had a temper, especially when he drinks. Sometimes he gets so angry. They admit that Diddy lied and he was not the best boyfriend or partner. He was kind of mean to his girlfriends, but he's not charged with being mean. He's not charged with being a jerk to his girlfriends. Essentially, he's charged with criminal acts that they say isn't criminal at all. They pretty much kind of talk about that they'll see domestic violence in this trial, and while they do take it seriously, it doesn't amount to sex trafficking from their perspective at all. They admit to Diddy doing drugs. They admitted to Diddy using baby oil. They said it's not a federal crime to use either of those things. They'll continue to fight for his freedom. They, painted the picture, and this was something we kind of got a glimpse of last week, where they were kind of painting the picture that these alleged victims in this case, including Cassie, including Jane Doe, were capable, strong women that were making adult choices. They were free choices, and they came with both the pros and the cons, and that essentially they were getting something out of Diddy, which was, their rent was paid for. Cassie got a car from him, that type of thing. And they said essentially that Diddy was a jealous man, but also that he, that women were jealous of him too. And a lot of his relationships were driven off of jealousy, and that, again, Diddy was extremely jealous, and that, the jealousy and the drugs they'll take responsibility for. And he's not being charged with being a flawed person. Now, when it comes to Cassie specifically in the defense's opening, they talked about how Cassie was in a relationship with another man when she had met Diddy, or that Diddy was in a relationship with Kim Porter until her death, which I thought was pretty particularly interesting, given that for the most part, I've seen this family out on social media and that type of thing. And from my perspective, I always felt like Kim Porter and Diddy kind of gave off this notion that they were just co-parenting, that it was never that Kim Porter was still with Diddy while Cassie was with Diddy. I was expecting for them to talk about the 2022 BET award moment where Diddy had specifically mentioned Cassie, and that talking about how Cassie had held him down and that type of thing, because from the defense's perspective, they were pretty much saying that Kim Porter was the love of Diddy's life, that once Cassie kind of knew that she'd never be Diddy's soulmate, that she would never be his wife, that type of thing, that's when she called off the relationship. And so that was a pretty interesting moment, or just interesting openings that, some parts weren't kind of talked about necessarily. And then even when it comes with Jane Doe, the defense says that Diddy and Jane Doe dated for 3 years. Their relationship was also plagued by jealousy. Jane wanted to be out in the public with Diddy, but for the most part, they kind of stayed inside. They were away from the public, and that's kind of where the issues kind of came about, is that Jane wanted to be public, like Diddy was with other women. I can even point to Young Miami, for example, as somebody that Diddy was kind of public with and dating around that time. Same with Lori Harvey, that type of thing. But apparently Jane Doe was kind of in the background as a figure in all of this. And so pretty much another interesting part that the defense kind of talked about towards the end of their opening statements was that Cassie was having financial trouble at the time that she had filed her civil lawsuit. They claimed that she had never gone to the police. Instead, she went to a civil lawyer to make money. They talked about the claim that she had made a demand for $30 million, that type of thing. And so those were just some of the biggest moments. As far as defense openings go. As far as Mia is concerned, the defense was talking about how, they had asked jurors to pretty much evaluate her motive as to testifying, because remember, she was an employee of Diddy's and that type of sort. And so, that was pretty much the biggest moments of the defense opening, as I kind of just recap essentially all of it.
No, I get it. And look, you don't have the ability to have a computer there. They don't allow electronic devices. So you're literally reading from your notes. It reminds me of when I was covering the Harvey Weinstein trial. I had to read from my notes too. Look, the big theme, I think, for the defense: love, jealousy, money. I think that was articulated well in the sense that this is what the motivations were behind the people who are coming forward against him now. And I think it's fascinating that they have owned up and admitted to a lot of what he did, but saying it doesn't amount to sex trafficking or racketeering. They mentioned Cassie filing the public lawsuit, millions of dollars, an incentive to lie. I thought it was really interesting how they went through a number of the predicate crimes to meet racketeering. So in order to prove racketeering, a criminal enterprise, a pattern of criminal activity, they say there was no bribery of a guard. It was to prevent bad PR for Sean Combs and Cassie about paying off to make sure that tape from the 2016 hotel doesn't come out. Kidnapping? Well, you have somebody who asked to be with him for 10 years. Drug trafficking was about personal use of drugs, that there was no conspiracy here. There was no criminal agreement. I thought this was interesting. And real quick on this, Elizabeth. You know, did I hear this correctly, that they're arguing he didn't pay for sex workers for prostitution purposes, right? Transportation of people for purposes of prostitution, what he's charged with, maximum of 10 years in prison. He was paying them for their time and experience? Did I just, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the defense there, that he allegedly paid sex workers for not what we think he paid sex workers for, allegedly paid sex workers for? Tell me if I'm completely wrong.
No, you're not completely wrong at all. That is essentially what they are saying, is that, you know, he didn't pay these escorts. He didn't have people pay for these escorts for sex necessarily. It was all for time, whether that time be possibly in the bedroom, whether that time be just for time spent. But you are definitely correct, Jesse, where the defense is definitely trying to paint it as, you know, this isn't transportation to engage in prostitution. And I know we'll talk about this more with one of the witnesses that took the stand today, but it's definitely something that the defense is alleging, that this was just time. This was not for prostitution. This is not payment for sex work or anything like that, but just time.
And real quick, before we now get into the witness testimony, which I think is fascinating, did you get any sense from the jury about how they were interpreting the defense's opening statement?
Not too much different from the government's opening statement, honestly. Okay. Again, from where I could see, I wasn't really seeing like head nods or any type of like confirmation that, oh, wow, or any like big eyeballs. I couldn't see that from where I was sitting. But, you know, it was kind of the same as the government's, where a lot of people were just paying attention. They were taking their notes and just kind of absorbing what the openings were for the case.
And talking about this, so I thought the way the prosecution began their case, first witness, first evidence introduced, was fascinating, because they started with arguably the most important piece of evidence in this case, as far as we know. The first witness laid the foundation for it, right? We're talking about the 2016 hotel hallway video of Sean Combs purportedly beating Cassandra Ventura. Talk to us about who the first witness was, what the government introduced, and what we should take away from it.
Yeah, so the first witness on the stand was Officer Israel Flores. He's a police officer for LAPD, but more notably is before he used to work for Securitas, and he had worked at the Intercontinental Hotel in Century City in California. So when they were talking about March 5th of 2016, you know, this witness, who again was for the government, he got a call about a woman in distress on the 6th floor of this hotel. And so he says during his testimony, he had observed a male and a female in the lobby. He recognized that this male was Sean Combs. And so at the time he was working as the assistant director for the Intercontinental Hotel. So, you know, his responsibilities were to respond to incidents, train trainees pretty much. And then he later on became the director. And that's kind of important, mainly because it kind of controlled what he was and wasn't able to do when it came to this surveillance video. So, for example, as an assistant director, he wasn't able to rewind it past a certain time frame. He wasn't even able to download it, or even download this video to attach onto the incident report or anything like that. So again, he was serving as an assistant director in that capacity at the time that this incident had occurred. You know, when they were talking about the surveillance video, Officer Flores was talking about how every floor of the hotel had cameras. They were motion-activated cameras, by the way. Again, they had the capacity to rewind and download these types of videos, but only the director of security was able to do so, and he didn't take over that role until later on. But as far as, you know, him writing up incidents reports, because we got to see that exhibit, was we got to see the exhibit of the incident report from that day in 2016. So before he responded to the call, he said he looked at the cameras. He saw a black man pacing back and forth. Then when he arrived onto the 6th floor, he saw DIDDY, or Sean Combs, in a towel, and then saw Cassie in the corner covering her face. He said he didn't know it was Cassie immediately. He just pretty much recognized DIDDY. He said that Diddy's demeanor, and this is a pretty interesting point, Jesse, was a blank stare, and said it was a devilish stare. Diddy at this point is still in his hotel, is still in his towel. He's still wearing socks. Another interesting point is that they refer to Cassie as Cece, but that she was pretty much scared and frightened, according to Officer Flores. he noticed upon arriving up to that floor that the elevator lobby flower vase was destroyed, something that we had seen in the video prior to that. He said there was a mess in the hallway, that he had told Diddy that this would be charged to his room, told him and Cassie to go back to their room, just so that way other guests in the hotel couldn't hear or notice anything that was going on. Diddy told Cassie that she wasn't going to be leaving this hotel. Officer Flores said that he didn't close the door all the way back to the hotel room because he thought that something was about to happen. But he said he did notice another black male inside the hotel room, and this is also pretty important because the government has alleged this person was an escort. They didn't necessarily say that during the direct or anything like that, but that Officer Flores didn't put this person or just this person's activity even inside or in that incident report, something that the defense definitely harped on during their cross-examination, but I'll get to that in just a little bit. But as far as this male that was inside the hotel room, he was fully clothed. He was just sitting in the corner of the bed, which is something that Officer Flores noted as kind of weird. Why was this person just sitting in the bed while all of this stuff was going on outside in the hallway? But pretty much after Cassie left, Diddy called him and was holding a stack of money and pretty much said, "Don't tell anyone." Now, Officer Flores says he didn't take this money, but noticed that it was a $100 bill wrapped in lots of cash. And so pretty much we got to see something that is very, very important, is that we got to see more of when that video kind of cut off from when we had saw it on that CNN report, right? Like we got to see, at first Cassie, she was with her bag, she's putting her socks on, then Diddy comes, he grabs her, hits her, stomps on her, something that we've all seen, right? But then afterwards, she gets up, she goes to the hotel phone, she calls someone, and then Diddy comes back. They go off camera. You also couldn't hear anything on this particular video because there was no sound. Then all of a sudden, Diddy comes back. Cassie's like putting her hands up to get away from Diddy, and then the surveillance kind of glitched in and out, and it was pretty standard that this was pixelated video. That's what Officer Flores says. But she had called someone on the hotel phone. Then we saw another camera view also of Cassie going down a hallway when security arrives. Diddy goes the opposite way, so they're going completely two different ways. Diddy's still in his towel throughout all of this. When Cassie returns back to where Diddy is going, it was essentially because she wanted her bag and she wanted her phone, so that way she could leave. And so Officer Flores says he didn't call the police because Cassie was adamant that she just wanted to leave, whereas Diddy said, this stuff can't be made public, which is where those allegations of like him allegedly bribing Officer Flores with that $100,000 according to the indictment. But Officer Flores, because of just the capabilities of not being able to rewind or download the video, actually snapped a video on his cell phone. So that's when you could kind of see audio, and it was because it was just background noise of when he was kind of taking a video from his phone. He was making kind of like silly commentary about his shiny shoes, that type of thing. But this incident happened. He was gone from work the following 2 days because that was his weekend. And then when he returned to work, he said a lot of staffers were talking about this incident, but he said that the video wasn't there anymore, and he never saw that video again until he saw it on the news, presumably when CNN first showed it. Now, when he was cross-examined by Brian Steele, he was questioned about the incident report, questioned about why he didn't describe Diddy as devilish in the incident report, questioned why he didn't mention the discoloration in Cassie's eye in the incident report, because he said under direct that Cassie had a purple eye. He said that they admit that no one at the hotel had called law enforcement about this, but everyone was talking about what had happened and that type of sort. So those were some of the big takeaways from just witness number one, just the first one, but a lot of an eye-opening picture there, especially as we got to see more of what happened after the moments that we had saw all from that brutal assault video. We didn't get to see the apology or anything like that, but maybe that'll come into evidence later down the line. So under direct examination, Officer Flores says that there was a point where, Diddy was trying to grab his phone and that type of thing and pushed Diddy against the wall. But when he was questioned about this incident under cross-examination, Steele questioned him on why he didn't put, you know, the whole Diddy up against the wall incident on this incident report. And pretty much he said, you know, well, he was trying to grab my hand. I did put that and include that inside the incident report. So when asked on redirect by the government, pretty much the summation of that was just that, you know, they weren't required to divulge every single detail inside these incident reports, even though under direct he also said these incident reports are about who, what, when, where, why, that type of thing. And so they, under direct, the government reminded, you know, the jury essentially that, you know, this was what's in the incident report. He wasn't he didn't have to go into every single specific detail when he was summing up that report, which came a few hours after the incident that day.
We know what the prosecution's doing here, right? They are setting the foundation for Cassandra Ventura to take the stand. I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. When she filed her lawsuit against Sean Combs, I think people were like, how do we know this is true or not? But as soon as that hotel video came out, it not only corroborated that particular moment, that particular section of her complaint, but some would say it corroborated her entire account about what happened with Diddy. So by starting with talking about the hotel incident and building that up, it is building the jury's view to say when she takes the stand, she already looks more credible in their eyes. Her account is already backed up by at least one witness and also the videotape, which brings me now to the next witness we heard from today, Daniel Phillip. Who is Daniel Phillip and what did he have to say?
Well, let me tell you something, Jesse. When they called Daniel Phillip to the stand, honestly, at first I thought he was just another police officer. He was very muscularly built. He had on a pretty tight suit, but he essentially was a male dancer, something that I was very surprised that was introduced so early on as far as the witnesses go. But, you know, Maureen Comey did this questioning for the government. Daniel Phillip said that he had received money from Cassie back in 2012 to pretty much have sex with her. He met Cassie through his boss. He was contacted by his boss after receiving a request for black dancers. So the boss sent him to the Gramercy Park Hotel. Essentially, when Daniel Phillip came to this hotel, and by the way, Gramercy Park Hotel is just uptown from where we are right now, he was expecting that he was doing a strip tease for a bachelorette party. So he arrived at the hotel around about nighttime. So when Cassie had opened the door, she was wearing lingerie. She was wearing a red wig. She had sunglasses on. She referred to the other man in her room as her husband. And she made it a point to tell Daniel Phillip, allegedly, that, you know, her husband wasn't gay, that he wouldn't touch the dancer, so essentially that he would feel more comfortable. Daniel Phillip testified that Cassie gave him a few thousands of dollars when he had walked inside that hotel room. The candles were lit on the table. There was Astroglide in the room, something that, you know, was both talked about in the indictments, as well as Cassie's now settled civil suit. It was a dark room, and then a man also came. He was in a white robe. He had a bandana over his nose and pretty much his mouth. So if you can picture like people going to music festivals in the desert, that type of thing, that was kind of what I was picturing a little bit. And then he also was wearing a hat. So just by that description, you could tell that this person just didn't want to be identified. But according to Daniel Phillip, this man was referred to as Baby, and then he recognized the voice as being that of Sean Combs. So he said that Diddy didn't say much, but that Diddy, while he was kind of going under this, like, you know, persona, was working in importing / exporting, which I thought was an interesting kind of tidbit to talk about if you're going to come up with a fake job, but I guess so. But Daniel Phillips, he testified that he and Cassie had sex, that she had rubbed baby oil on him. He had rubbed it on her as well too. Now this is a part where, you know, it gets very, very graphic, something that, you know, they talk about in the indictment as well too, that, you know, Diddy was watching, he had pleasured himself during it. That Daniel Phillip wasn't wearing protection during this encounter. And I talk about this specifically because at this moment, when it started to get more into these graphic details, that's when I saw Diddy's daughters get out of the courtroom. You know, imagine listening and being inside that gallery and listening to your father's proclivities and alleged crimes, especially sex crimes at that, and just having to go into the full detail of it. I saw them kind of all just walk up. They stayed outside of the courtroom for a little bit. They came back, but then I think their guardians, their moms, were kind of like, you know, and I say Chance's mom, excuse me, but they were just kind of like, you know, let's get you out of here. And so they didn't stay for most of the duration of this testimony, because you're really kind of getting into the weeds of just what she was wearing, what he was wearing, the kind of acts that were going on, that type of thing. Now, Diddy's sons were still inside that courtroom when all of this was being testified to. And so, you know, they were just, you know, and they're older than the girls and that type of thing. So it makes a lot of sense. But Daniel Phillip testified that Cassie had messaged him after this, asking for a picture of his genitalia, and then asking him to even come back. They were in the room for a few more hours the second time, and this entire time Diddy was pleasuring himself throughout this whole second sexual encounter, as well as the first encounter too. He said he didn't really know who Cassie was until his boss had actually looked her up, but essentially, you know, when Maureen Comey was questioning him, it was, you know, did they do anything else besides have sex, and besides have sex in front of Diddy? Didn't seem like that according to his testimony. So he said he did this from 2013 to 2014. They did this, these kind of threesomes in a way, you know, at Gramercy Park Hotel, at Essex Hotel, at Cassie's apartment, at Diddy's home, and just other places here in New York. And so there was a name actually that he had to check into, or that the name was tied under, and that was the name Black. And so he would go to the hotel, tell the person at the concierge or just at the front desk, you know, I'm here for Black, and then they would be given, or then he would be taken up to the room, and then more things would happen. But, you know, there were points where Daniel Phillip had even referred to or even thought of Cassie as a friend, said he stopped kind of participating in these sexual encounters, mainly because he saw Diddy being physically abusive towards Cassie. He said that he's, you know, there was one incident where he had taken her to the back of a room, and he heard slapping noises, as he kind of described it. But even when it was talking about just like what all went on inside these rooms when all of these things were going down, it was, you know, Diddy giving directions like slow down, separate from each other, you know, doing a role play like they had recently met at the airport. Don't ejaculate just yet, and if he were to do so, to do it on her stomach or inside of her, that type of thing. He even said that there was one moment where Cassie wanted him to urinate on her, and Diddy pleasured himself to that. And so there were just a lot of graphic details about it. But then there was another interesting point where Daniel Phillip thought that there would be any type of point that he could be killed allegedly by the defendant, because, you know, Diddy allegedly made him turn over his driver's license, and he took a photo of it. So he thought that, you know, this is somebody with a lot of power, with a lot of money, who could essentially find him anywhere at any place. He has my driver's license, he knows my identification, he has my ID, that type of thing. Now, he didn't say that, but, you know, we all know what a driver's license looks like. And so there were moments that he did say that he was fearful of his life, and that he pretty much couldn't even sexually perform, especially with Diddy inside that room. So it was a lot of graphic details, a lot of stuff that was talked about there. And then even, we're not even in the thick of the cross yet, because, you know, Xavier Donaldson said he has about an hour left of cross on him tomorrow morning. And so we're probably going to see a lot more of that cross-examination, which, you know, it seems like from the defense's aspect and point right now, it seems like it's attack credibility. That's their strategy. You know, why was Daniel Phillip doing this type of service when, you know, his service didn't provide prostitution? It prohibited it. He said that he wasn't even necessarily a male dancer whenever he was working at this company. This company that was a male review shop. Essentially, he was just a supervisor, and that the company was using fake addresses to optimize searches, and Daniel Phillip didn't know it was fraudulent, that type of thing. So it seems like from the defense's perspective, it's definitely attack the credibility of whoever is going to be on that witness stand.
And let me add, it seems that they're saying that Cassandra Ventura was a willing participant in all of this. And I think I understood the reporting to suggest that Mr. Phillip had asked Cassandra Ventura Why are you still with him, right? I mean, that's going to be a big theme. Why did you keep coming back to Diddy? And correct me if I'm wrong, Elizabeth, did we learn a little bit more about the text message history between her and Phillip? Because the more that the defense can highlight that, you know, if she was sending him these messages and recruiting him, how much was it Diddy's direction versus how much she was doing it herself? I mean, weren't the text messages between them quite explicit?
Well, the problem is we couldn't see the text messages whenever the defense was talking about them. They were they were displayed essentially just for the parties only. And so we, inside the gallery, couldn't even see the text messages. So we don't really know the full extent of what was said on them. Even from my view, really, I could only see just kind of the outscope of just one message, and my eyesight's not the best. And so I couldn't really read in depth these types of text messages. But it seems like from the government's perspective that these text chain will actually be brought back when Cassie does get on the stand. So that's probably when we in the gallery will probably be able to see what this text chain really includes. But from what we saw when Daniel Phillip was on the stand, we could not see the full extent of this particular exhibit, that being the text messages.
I saw reporting indicating that at least one message might have been Mr. Phillip writing to Cassandra Ventura, I want to, you know, have sexual relations with you. Real quick, before I let you go, Elizabeth, just what was Combs' demeanor as he was listening to this witness testimony from both, you know, Mr. Flores and Mr. Phillip?
Well, he definitely was paying very close attention. I would say even more so with Daniel Phillip on the stand, probably more than Officer Israel Flores. But Diddy was definitely paying attention very closely because also, just even think about it, this is somebody who, you know, Diddy had encounters with in the sexual nature, just from what Daniel Phillip was describing while he was on the witness stand. And so he definitely was somebody that he had kept a close eye on, was probably likely passing notes to his defense attorney. Can't verify that 100% because from where I was sitting after we returned from lunch, I was actually sitting on the opposite side of the courtroom, so I didn't get the full kind of look or anything like that. But from what I could see, I definitely saw a head up, definitely looking very intently, especially when Daniel Phillip took the stand.
Elizabeth Milner, thank you so much. Great reporting. I know you're exhausted. You had an incredibly long day. Go get some dinner. Thank you so much.